Hey, yo, it's me, Pops Van Marmalade, and you're watching the Comics-Related Madness Network. Uh-huh. So come get some. CromCon. CromCon.
Hey, we want to shout out to our sponsors, Daytona Beach Comic Con. If you are a fan of comic books, if you're a fan of comic book conventions, and if you like meeting comic book creators and getting comics and comic related stuff, then you need to make your plans to attend Daytona Beach Comic Con. This year's show is September 9th and 10th. Silverline will be there, so you should make your plans to be there too. We'll see you there. If you like comics and find yourself in the Orlando, Florida area, doesn't everyone come to Orlando at some point in time to see the House of Mouse? But when you're here, you need to make it a point to visit Coliseum of Comics, especially the one on East Colonial Drive. They carry Silverline comics, even a limited edition Coliseum of Comics version of our comics. So, when you go, be sure to ask for Silverline Comics and tell them we sent you. OCD stands for Orlando Collector Deviants. OCD, Steve and Trish, they're a family of geeks who promote geek things, particularly those around the Orlando, Florida area. They're big supporters of Silverline, and we think you should be supporters of theirs too. Go give them some love. If you are an independent comic book maker and you need to get your independent comics made, you need to look no further than Kablam Digital Printing. They print our books, and they do a bang-up job. They're not only trusted by Silverline, but many, many independent comic book makers. Head on over to kablam.com and see for yourself just how easy it is to have your comic printed by them. And tell them Silverline sent you.
Hi, this is Tim TK, host of That Silverline Show on Tuesday. Join us at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific every Tuesday night as we discuss pop culture and the joys of making comics.
Hi, I'm Barb Kilber, co-host of Silverline's Wednesday Wham. Join us each Wednesday night as we discuss comics, literature, movies, and anything else that may catch our attention.
I'm Roland Mann, and I host Silverline's Silver Sunday. Join me every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern as we make mine Silverline.
Hello, internets. Welcome back to That Silverline Show on Tuesday. I'm your host, Tim TK, and joining us from the seafloor, Jose Fuentes.
Hey, everybody. The seafloor.
Thankfully, Jose, as well as everyone at Silverline, is safe. Some people were in a little more of the danger zone than others, but Florida-based Silverliners are so far looking all good. And also joining, David Rios.
Hello.
And we over here on the West Coast are just now dealing with a little bit of light rain for our fall. So, and QB, yes, stays alive. So tonight we're going to be talking about more of our Halloween topics. We were originally going to do something more art focused. However, we weren't sure if Jose would have internet, so we switched over to genre writing. So we're going to be talking about combining dark fantasy and black comedy in comics. Probably also point on examples from other forms of media as well. But before we get into that, let's figure out what we've all been into, what has been keeping our inspiration going. Start with David. This last week, what have you been reading, watching, playing, listening to?
Very little reading. A little bit of the Krakoa stuff. I actually haven't been able to read some of the independents, which I really wanted to do. Just haven't had time. I did watch or get caught up with the Agatha all along stuff. I did kind of get sucked in and binge the remaining Rings of Power, though. Yeah. That was I thoroughly enjoyed that. And no games, nothing like that. No time for that. So that's basically it.
That's fair. Yeah, I still need to finish the last episode of the season of Rings of Power, but I've been enjoying it as well.
Awesome.
Jose, have you had time to do anything, or has your life been boarding and unboarding the house?
No, we didn't actually board it up. We had no video game playing, and I have a slew of movies on my computer that I kind of watched that while I worked as best I could. You know what
Sure.
I mean? And I had a time limit of how long I can work before I couldn't use my iPad anymore, or I couldn't, I couldn't use my computer. So, like I said, we had a generator, so I kind of charged it during the day and then worked a little bit at night. But for the most part, I watched movies and I worked on pages. That's pretty much all I did, and I didn't read much. It was too hot. Like the first day after the storm was nice and cool. It was a great morning and everything. And then after that, it was just take a nap during the day.
Sure. Let's see there. On my end, I binge watched Blue Lock Season 1, which, for those of you who don't know, it's a soccer anime, which is it's soccer up until a point where it's very much not, and it just goes off the rails, and I kind of love it. And started watching Dan to Dan, which is absurdist modern black fantasy and dark humor. So I'm going to be honest. I feel like Jose, it would deeply offend you, but you might find it a little entertaining.
I've actually heard me that. It's not about that show, but there are certain things oh, Joe, you would not like this. I was like, it's nice to know what all is out there, even if it's not something you necessarily agree with. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But no, it's a fun time so far. It's very Halloween themed, so I figured I'd start it. The core premise is a boy and a girl in school. He believes in aliens but not ghosts. She believes in ghosts but not aliens. So they dare each other to go experience a alien abduction scene or a ghost haunting scene. And when they go to their respective places, they encounter aliens and ghosts and get powers from that experience.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah. And it's actually totally crowdfunded and it's really well animated. Cool. But yes, it is. The black humor gets very, very deep into the black. So I figured it's kind of a topical mention for this week. Reading wise, still continuing on Dresden Book 3.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll be getting into tonight's topic, which is combining dark fantasy and black comedy. So I guess starting off ground level, in case anyone doesn't know, dark fantasy, as like that implies, it still involves swords, sorcerers, and the likes. And much like typical fantasy can be in a modern or even futuristic setting. However, usually involves more dark or dismal style themes. Can involve also more almost anti-tropes, where a lot of times instead of you're going to having the powerful kingdom of righteous warriors fighting against the evil empire, right? You can have the theme where everyone is the evil empire and you're just trying to get by. There's a lot of storylines like that, like Black Company. Black comedy is comedy that often makes light or finds humor in areas that are taboo or macabre. And because of that, it can be a little sacrilege to some, but if you're wanting to make light of a situation, it's usually find that it's very therapeutic for people going through grief because of how it can make you think about death in a different way. Roberto, my heart went out for like a week, but I had interesting stuff. I was rewatching True Blood. I was wondering what it looked like in comics by Jose. There you go. So have to have Jose draw some True
A
Blood.
lot of trees.
Yeah.
A lot of swamp. I've seen True Blood.
Yeah. And so you end up getting some examples where these things end up getting fused to create sort of dark, expressive storylines that still have like fantastical visual elements to pull you in. Like that's often the use of like a dark fantasy of the black comedy is the fact that you can pull out fantasy to have strong visuals to still give it like some surface level appeal, and then like the darker themes and the depressing stuff is the storytelling pulling on your heartstrings when you get into it. And comics have actually hosted several of these, and perhaps three really well-known comics that we'll have explored out of the indie or semi-indie scene out to others. I'm going to say semi-indie because one of them is Vertigo. But Hellboy, The Sandman, and Saga.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are really good examples of blending dark fantasy with black comedy. I'd say Hellboy is definitely a little more on the black comedy side, whereas Sandman's more on the dark fantasy side. But as we discussed in previous genre blending episodes, it's not an equal 50-50. You can find whatever ratio best suits the storyline. So I'll open up the floor to you guys. Do you have any examples or experience reading comics or engaging with stories that exist in the space of being both dark fantasy and black comedy?
I have two examples. One is Barbaric from Vault Comics, which is if you've ever read it, it's not a modern, sorry, it's a fantasy setting, and it's about this like barbarian dude with this big axe that has a skull face on it, and these witches, there were 3 witches, cursed him that if someone yells out they need help, instead of like marauding and whatnot, he has to go help them. And
Amazing.
his axe talks to him, and it's like a cursed axe. It craves blood. So every time like he goes and swings like goblins and monsters and whatnot, the axe is just in there smiling, and like the dialogue for the axe, the more people he kills, the more drunk the axe gets, and his like speech starts to slur. It's hilarious. But like I thought that was good.
Roberto, yes, Jose does also ink.
Most of what I do is inking, but I'm also penciling. I'm penciling obsoletes. The rest of obsoletes number 3 and number 4. But I'm also penciling. Oh, sorry, I'm inking in cat and mouse vipers, and then inking over my pencils. But yeah, that, and so my second one is Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, which is like from the 80s, 90s. I think it's the 90s. I remember when I was in high school.
Okay. Yeah.
And do you remember that one? James, have you heard of that one? Have you read it?
I have not. Actually, I may have. It sounds
look
familiar,
it up.
but yeah. I have the technology.
So basically, essentially, what it breaks down to is Johnny gets away with so
Yes.
he can pour blood all over a wall, so like the bad things stay out, amongst other things. But it's funny.
Yeah, because that's the same guy who did Invader Zim, right? It's technically
It's
the same
the same,
universe.
exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
And if you want to add a third, Invader Zim was pretty. Was it like a fantasy as well, like a space alien fantasy with some dark humor in it?
Yeah, they canonically magic exists in Invader Sim, so yes, it is fantasy.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think because Invader Zim, because that was a comic as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm pretty sure the comic or the cartoon was toned down from the comic.
A lot, and even then, which is absurd because the cartoon is one of those things like I don't know how they aired this on Children's Network.
You're right.
I know, yeah. Yes, no, I remember that.
Yes,
those
are my two examples.
Yeah.
I don't really have examples that I can think of that kind of mix both of those together. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't have I don't have good examples of that I can think of offhand. I mean, there's a lot of things that I had liked that kind of touched on one or the other, but nothing that really kind of
Like
Sure.
merges the two.
merged the two. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I feel like depending on the universe as a whole for Vampire the Masquerade and the World of Darkness, it kind of also sits in the line because there are definitely more absurdist, funny moments in it. But also depending on your game master,
Right.
you can definitely have moments like that. That's where I try to sit, like the Elender by Night campaign that we have ongoing that will be resuming for part 3 this year. As our Halloween special.
I was thinking about our game. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of Jose's favorites.
Yeah.
That is. I'm not even gonna lie. That's one of my favorite streams.
I don't believe Jose has anything he wrote coming up through Silverline yet, but there's always a chance.
Right. Well, I am not much of a writer. I definitely when I made my own self-published book, it wasn't so much writing as much as like setting up the scenes for me, and then I kind of filled it in with script that doesn't make any sense, which I don't like, because that's like more like the Marvel way of doing stuff, and I don't like that
Yeah.
necessarily. Roland and I have gone back and forth on that one.
Yeah, Cartoon Network had there's a lot of weird choices made in the editing bay there, and
Like Ren and Stimpy, that's from the us '90s people are weird.
yeah, no, that's part of the generation that like boosted those ratings. Yeah,
Right.
but definitely. Okay, so I will say Jose does have some experience in dark fantasy though with the book he did, right?
I do.
Particularly in the subgenre of Gothic Western, because Gothic and supernatural themes are subgenres of dark fantasy because everything is a genre of itself, and we can't have anything that labels. But yeah, so Jose is working that. I have currently worked in Dracula, which is more so dark fantasy. I didn't really inject much comedy into this one. No, there's a few moments of gallows humor, but outside of that, it's not quite a genre blending, but it's more so sometimes you have to pull in another genre just to let your main area breathe. Blood and JP, our topic tonight is at the top on the video description, blending dark fantasy and black comedy. And David, I don't know if you had any experience working in either dark fantasy or black comedy. If you haven't had any experience ingesting it.
Not a lot. Just most of my stuff was Marvel, so then there was there were a few things in there, but not like some of the independent. I mean, I think of a lot of the the dark stuff, like the Eternity things and all that, but a lot of that was kind of more before my time. And as far as the dark stuff goes, a little bit in the Ultraverse stuff with like the rune crossover stuff like that. But I like I said, that's a lot of either you get into the dark side or the really dark stuff, but you don't really go a lot into the like dark comedy, injecting into it on there. So yeah, it's a little hard for me on that one.
No. Okay. Well, to go into exploring more dark fantasy, it's kind of one of those things where you have trouble defining the exact elements of it, but I guess the core concept when developing a world for it is it has to be a world where your monsters and evil forces thrive, as opposed to our just outside elements trying to affect your world, right? Kind of more so like the end of the Second Age of Lord of the Rings, as opposed to go back to Rings of Power, since that's a timely reference. It's post forging of the Rings of Power, where Sauron has more or less subjugated Numenor and a good swath of Middle Earth. Not really getting into or as opposed to the Third Age, where we have the movies and the books, right, for Lord of the Rings, where the kingdoms of men have already like established themselves and are more so trying to keep darkness at bay. But it's a world where darkness is kind of the overall force and power and pervading in some way. You could just think about this as a going back to Bram Stoker's Dracula. We're in his kingdom of Transylvania. Dracula has become the dominant political force as well as the dominant supernatural force. So everyone there essentially works for him, no questions asked. And you can think about this as any number of vampire or monster movies as well, where the vampires have more or less become like the overlords, right? Like Daywalkers, as a movie example.
Yeah, you could probably kind of, tie that a little bit into like the Wesley Snipes Blade trilogy and stuff like that, because there was kind of some comedy related stuff there, some humor injected in there. But
yeah, I'd say Blade, pulling from like a mainland franchise, Blade is probably as far as Marvel has crossed into this genre blending, because it is Blade's universe is always darker. And Midnight Suns is always more dark than
Midnight Suns.
Yeah,
too.
it's kind of the idea is that Blade or the Midnight Suns are the underdogs, right? That the forces of evil are the dominant powers, and of course, it's got that classic Marvel wit to it, where Blade is cracking jokes when he's like decapitating people, right?
Yeah, and his over the top stylized.
Yeah.
Things, but
I mean, shooting the bolt from a crossbow into a guy sticking to a wall saying "stick around." Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Classic.
So, kind of the point of dark fantasy and is the twofold. One, by having a setting that is naturally inclined towards antagonistic forces, even if your characters are more. You might have anti-heroes or like morally gray characters as your protagonists, like in Black Company, but having a universe where everything is so driven by the antagonist, it's much easier to drive your tension in the atmosphere, because there is always something evil around the corner, because the corner itself might be evil, you don't know. But also gives you space to craft a more morally complex character, which can create a more compelling story, because you can have characters like in Black Company where they don't necessarily have like a sense of greater good, but they have a sense of fraternity as well as like a light morality to them, where in a situation where they'd absolutely be better served to not having either of those characteristics. And things like this. You can also think back to the first trilogy in the Trist Drist saga, what is in Menzo Branson.
Homeland? That was Homeland, right? When he was growing up?
Well, yeah, when he was growing up in Menzo Branson, because Menzo Branson is, if you need a dark fantasy setting, Menzo Branson is a terrible place.
Oh my gosh.
But you get the idea of like of a character who does not have any positive influences in his life at that moment, but is developing his own sense of complex morality in opposition to the forces around him, which drives him into outcast. And so that's there's also just comics stuff, so it's still a comics reference. Yeah, things like that. Also, if I just keep on talking, if you at any point you guys want to, feel free to do so. Blade is cool, but the Deadpool story where he falls for Dracula's daughter is underrated. Yes. Also, the fact that Dracula is in the Krakoa stuff for a time was interesting.
Right. Like I didn't even know that. I don't follow a lot of, honestly, I don't follow a lot of Marvel.
That's fair. I mean, everyone enjoys their own thing. You know, not everyone's going to enjoy dark fantasy or black comedy. I do, but I understand that my taste is different or darker than others. So explore dark fantasy for a little bit. So now let's talk about black comedy. So this one's easier to define. It's humor derived from grim or taboo subjects. So oftentimes this involves humor directly related to death, mutilation, some of the more horror subjects. Some like things related to more also psychology topics. So those jokes as related to like religions or things like that. And this can do a couple different things. Is that it can offer a strange relief in a bleak setting. An example is it wasn't dark fantasy, but it is a form of gallows humor in the D&D movie Honor Among Thieves, where they're casting Speak with Dead on all the different guys, and then the guys either don't know a thing or they keep on like recounting the point up till they die, but it's not the full story, so you have to keep on doing it. You just see people die over and over again in terrible ways. And then also just leaving the guy kind of stuck there for eternity because they don't ask him his last question.
Misspeaking while they were questioning the dead. No, that's not a question. No, that's not.
Yes. Yeah.
Like I think any comic or story that has a dark fantasy or just any kind of like macabre-esque kind of story has to have that a comic character just to not so much brighten it up or lighten it, but like kind of break the tension. You know what I mean? So like adding, like to me, I think like Preacher. I think Preacher's kind of a dark story. You know what I mean in regards to just like the storylines that they have, and then you have Cass. You know what I mean? You have the vampire guy, and like not even speaking of the TV series, but like even the comic. Like to me, he was like his dialogue and whatnot was more of a break for like the tension in the between pages.
No. It definitely having that voice there also serves the second purpose, which is allowing for dark themes and more perhaps repressed themes to be explored in a way that is digestible.
Right.
I mentioned earlier that black comedy also gets some use in terms of grief therapy because it allows you, like a good black comedy, will allow you to think about death in a way that is digestible. But thinking about The Crow in The Sandman, where if it was not for The Crow, Morpheus would have just stopped trying about like 3 pages into this. But it's that voice where it's they're joking, almost making light of a situation, but they're providing that counterpoint that drives the character to see a way out or to do something or just allow the conversation to be explored. So they're dealing with something like loss of life, loss of family, loss of purpose, but you're having that voice like, well, it's not all bad. You could be this other guy. Or, it's not all bad. You could also be stuck in hell.
Right.
Where it allows your character to see a way out or to rationalize thoughts, but also then as a reader, you're given the mental flexibility to explore some of these themes in a way that isn't just one-sided, it's more nuanced.
So, like in regards to like say Matthew, the bird, the crow, right, or a
Yeah.
raven, or from Sandman. It's more than just comedic relief, right?
Hmm.
It's yeah, like you said, making it, giving you bits, sections that are digestible before you move on to the next like bit of suspense before the next bit of tense, I guess. Not so much stress. I'm not sure what the word is.
That tension, but yeah,
Tension. Yeah. Okay.
yeah, it gives you space to break up the tension, allow the story to breathe, but also it gives you this point where even in those darker moments, it allows you to kind of piece apart all the tension that just happened in a way to kind of rationalize it and make it, understand it. Because having a story that is just tension for tension's sake is a good way to make your reader put it down because they can't handle the heart palpitations. But so giving it so breathing room, but also breathing room that then pulls apart the tension in nuanced ways will do a lot to um, uh, make it feel more nuanced, but also allow for more moments of resonance with the reader.
Okay.
And of course, you have to understand the timing of that, and figure out that you can't do it all one way or all the other. You have to figure out your timing, how you're going to time your moments of relief. But black humor is such a vital too, especially when you get to deal with dark fantasy, which one common thing also happens in dark fantasy is the use of horror elements. Oftentimes, they have horror and dark fantasy are kind of interchanged at some points, especially when you get to monster storylines. You think about how all the universal monsters are actually in some way dark fantasy, or vice versa. Yeah. And to get into kind of more space for you guys to talk about what you do, when you get into something like dark fantasy or black humor, oftentimes, especially pulling on Jose's example, Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, you'll have a visual style. Also, I'll pull as an example for this Hack and Slash by Tim Seeley. You're going to have a visual style that is much different from traditional fantasy or humor comics. Oftentimes I've seen it be more heavily shadowed, or line work is more sketchy. Last week, Dave and I talked about the different types of coloring we want to use when exposing someone's guts to make the page more impactful. Yeah. So I'll pass the question over to you, Jose. When you're doing something where that the subject's going to be much darker, say you're dealing with more like something more in the style of like a monster-driven dark story versus traditional superhero fighting bad guy of the week style thing. What are going to be some of the considerations you're going to make when it comes to like your line work as well as perhaps like your shading you're going to like put on there?
Well, for me, for superhero books, superhero stories, if you're having superheroes duking it out and battling it out and stuff like that, to me, you want those lines to be like clean. You want them to be bold, right? Like bold lines, thicker line weight. You know what I mean? In regards to like the form, the silhouette of the superheroes, and I think you can like forego that a little bit when it comes to doing like more of a dark fantasy story. You want there to be more black. You want there to be that creates drama, that creates suspense. You know what I mean? When you have like cast lighting on say you're fighting a creature, you're trying to avoid a creature, and there's a cast light on his face, and so like you just see, you know what I mean, like specific lighting that just allows the facial features to look deeper. And I've referenced my own face with flashlight up and whatnot, like from different angles, doing stuff just to make sure that it looked semi close to what I wanted. But I have tried to use to go. So I'm not very heavy handed with blacks, but I try to put in as much as I can, and then even digitally pull out with a white brush. You know what I mean? And I try to use more not so solid line pencils and brushes that I have, like digitally. I try to use more the ones that are broke up because that shows, that broken line. You know what I mean? That I feel that helps to, um, I don't know, give it just more, not so much a monster feel, but give it more of a like erratic. You know what I mean? If you're watching any horror slasher horror movie, the part that that creates the suspense for you is when they're running from the monster and the camera's always moving like this, like as they're running. That's the same like feeling I try to give with like different brush strokes and different like the dry brush pencils and stuff like that digitally.
Yeah. Like, I also find that like um, uh, Spawn does this quite a bit depending on the run. But I feel like when moments like when I guess to do a Marvel example, like in Legion when they get to using like the Shadow King and things like that, they also get to a moment where I feel like things get more sketchy almost like they use the lines almost to reflect the mismatched sense of reality or like the idea that like if you're looking at something scary, you're probably not going to look at it for very long. So it's almost that thing of like you're seeing stuff out of proportion or seeing something that isn't quite like fully formed in your mind's eye. Hey, it's actually for pops. But yeah, it's kind of something I've noticed, and I already noticed that I've stated before that I have a love for sketchy line work. So I think that's also why I'm drawn to like some horror comics or stuff more than others, just because of the pop into sketchy line work.
Well, I'm pretty sure some of the older like EC comics, like not all the lines when they were doing paneling, not all the lines were straight. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Perfect lines. I'm pretty sure they were erratic as well. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Especially when it came to like high tense moments, or you know what I mean, where they just want to show that the characters in there are just gone bonkers and lost. You know what I mean? Lost any sense
yeah,
of like order. Creates a sense of chaos.
yeah. Definitely. David, how about from a colors perspective? If you're not dealing with something that's going to be a dark fantasy, is that going to kind of affect like the tones of colors you put on your palette, or um, how much or little you affect the contrast of the page?
Yeah, it definitely will. Depends on the content of the page, and what kind of effects they're doing. I definitely wouldn't approach it like I would a superhero. Um, Typically, like Jose was saying, the use of sharp lines, a lot of contrast, a lot of defined things, even in color wise. Um, when you're approaching a superhero book, you want a lot of contrast. You want something, bold colors, things like that. I mean, there's a reason why Spider-Man's, reds are deep reds and his blues are deep blues, and Superman's, same thing, and that yellow on his chest, and Batman's yellow chest is, pretty defined. When you're dealing with somebody, something that's like, you know dark. I mean, you can just turn around and look at things like Sandman, and those books. There's a lot of blending in the colors, and the colors are staying in a certain more muted range. When you look at stuff like Spawn, because he delves in the kind, the hero. Maybe he's not the superhero type thing, but he's also in the muck. You see a lot of contrast with things like Violator and stuff like that, where you have a lot of more muted things. But because Spawn has that superhero power, you have that contrast of his suit is very dark and all that, but his powers are contrasting. So in his case, you have a lot of the ectoplastic green, bright greens and stuff like that for when he does his effects. So sitting there and doing something like, if I were to do something like a Universal Monsters type thing, it would be a very monotone palette. A lot of subtle colors and a lot of blendings, because a lot of things that you want to do in there is you want to hide, and you want to work with a lot of the sketchy lines and things like that to kind of, give an overall feel. So it would be very muted, and I would kind of, go that route. And unless you're, like we discussed last time, where, you have somebody who's disemboweled and you really want to bring that, the guts or whatever, then at that point you want to, kind of bring a more enriched color to kind of separate it. But typically, for the most part, I would totally approach those type of books and scenes with a very muted, overall darker, maybe, with settings, a lot of those take place in like, rain, air, downpours and, mists and fogs and things like that. So, you would want to play with a lot of washed out colors and grays and things like that, just to kind of continue that mood. And that's how I'd approach it, depending on what the content is and what the artwork is.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like almost like a counterpoint to exactly what we talked about last week, where last week we were talking about, like, when your main focus is the body horror, you're going to want to have the body itself, like the mutilation, be the primary focus. So you're going to want to contrast on that. Whereas if you're doing it like dark fantasy, loves its monsters, so the body may just be almost like set dressing for the monster in the background, so everything may be more muted or a lot less contrast between the page, and then you just have like this pop of color in the monster's eyes in the background or something.
Yeah, you've got stuff like that, and kind of, if I kind of want to visualize that, think of a lot of, like we were talking before, back alley, a lot of, dark colors, a lot of things like that. And then you switch to the scene where out of, you see the after effect, and here's the body, and, creative lighting, something done by, the penciler and all that. Maybe what they do is they bring in the body into the area that's under the street light.
Yeah.
So everything else is, and even within the save panel, you can kind of focus the body under the light, where you have a lot of detail and, and things are lit up so you can see that. But then, outside of the light, like you said, you may see some kind of a glowing eyes or something that's pushed back into the shadows, so that that they're still there, but your focus is more on the detail and more on the colors of the street lit area, where you would typically see later on in a movie or a comic, where the detectives arrive and they view the aftermath scene, where you get all the detail and stuff. So that's a kind of what I'm thinking about, when you're doing the blending is, maybe you're highlighting into the light and bringing them into the light for, showing your detail, but then keeping the monsters in the dark in the background.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the reasons why people kind of love the visual designs of characters, well, reason why people love the genre is the characters themselves. Usually they also have like a very strong visual style. If you think about like Guts from Berserk, right? The knight and the swordsman in black with like the full black armor and the giant dragon slayer sword. Oh, I lost her name.
Lost your train of thought.
Yes. Oh, what is it? The Assassin and Dishonored. Sort of like these, you usually get because of how dark the universe is, you can usually get away with making your character, your main hero, also look a little more villainous because everyone agrees that villains just look cooler than heroes usually do. And part of that comes also into building the characters as a whole is going to be different in a dark fantasy, black comedy than it is going to be in a traditional fantasy. Because it's very often that you have sort of your paladin style character. It's rare that you have someone who's just like the pinnacle of morality and justice as your main character. Usually you have someone like a Guts or like a Spawn who is a cynical anti-hero. They might have a tragic 95% of the time they're going to have a tragic background. But also they're going to have some sort of either like sharp wit, which lives into the black humor, or they're going to play against the punchlines, which almost creates the punchline itself, which is something like Geralt from The Witcher. Right? Geralt has a striking visual, like in the games and the comics. Just the shock of white hair, yellow eyes, and the two swords hilted across his back. Like it's really hard, I think, to. It's one of those profiles I think now that it's like hard to mislabel because there's a point of proliferation. But he doesn't really. He has a wit, but he rarely uses it. More than often not, when he gets the opportunity, he just grunts at the scene, and that kind of becomes the joke, is that he grunts and walks off. Pair that with his counterpart, Dandelion the Bard, who is more of the absurdist comedic character. And Dandy getting shocked by the terrible dark things happening in front of him becomes the punchline there. And so you're going to have some considerations as the writer in that your hero needs to fit the scene. So if you're in a universe where monsters and darkness and evil is all thriving, then they need to be someone who can survive and even succeed in this world. So they're going to have some level of darkness or evil to them that perhaps they're trying to overcome, or is something that affected them in their past, and now they have found a way to weaponize it for, more or less some form of good goal, which is why they relate to them. And so you may end up flipping a few character personalities where your hero may have more dark traits than light traits. And your characters that don't fit in and are going to be comedic characters are probably going to be characters that would be right at home in a traditional fantasy. But then also get into the visual profile of them, where you're going to be working with your artists for all that. I'm just going to keep on writing the Geralt example because it's in my head right now. But his thing, like very strong armor profile. Like it's leathers, but it's all like, heavy leathers with like the padded straps and all that. Sometimes it's a straight black jacket. Do something. Every anti-hero loves white hair. I don't know who decided this was the case, but
I blame the mangas.
Yeah, something. And also different colored eyes or something weird with the eyes. I think it comes with the idea like eyes being the gates to the soul, right? So if like your hero's eyes are weird, that means they have a weird soul.
Right? There's something not, or something off about them. Like, yeah, they may be your hero, but they're hero with like a darkness, or hero with like, you know what I mean? That kind of rides the line, and I could see that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you said with Gerald, Geralt,
Geralt,
yeah. His yellow eyes. You know what I mean? You have, and the different flip of that, like you had mentioned, Drizzt Do'Urden, his eyes are purple or lavender, right? And that's supposed to represent like the good contrast to like the generational like evil and badness of the Drow from Menzoberranzan and whatnot. So like, I mean, it plays both ends. You can flip it, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But it's that little spark of one thing or the other, right? So you have little spark of chaos, a little spark of darkness in a good character, or you have a little spark of hope in what is stereotypically meant to be a darker character, a darker race, a darker ethnicity in regards to like stories.
Yeah, definitely. And also, both of them have very strong weapon profiles.
Yeah.
Where Geralt has the two sheathed like silver and steel long swords across his back. So you have like from any kind of angle that you draw him in the comics, like it's always kind of striking, like how these two things are.
Right. He's got a silhouette that you could recognize if you saw him in just the black silhouette.
Yeah. And Drist has the two scimitars with the very silly names that I can't remember at the moment.
Twinkle and Ice and Death.
Yeah, Twinkle and Ice and Death, yeah.
Where'd it go, Jose?
I'm winning this trivia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If there's some sort of D&D knowledge, I can count on Jose to know it if I don't. But yeah.
I do know a lot.
Yes. But yeah, he's Twinkle and Ice. And like every cover, or like every time he's drawn like a sword fight, like the different stances he has, or like either he's like flying down with them both drawn, or he's doing like the duelist pose or something like that. Where I feel like because of the implication of violence and the world itself being violent, giving your hero a strong silhouette that involves both their armor or some sort of cloak or shadowy device they can use to like hide themselves, right? Go back to the assassin from Dishonored, like the cloak and mask,
Right.
or the swords that either Geralt or Witcher has, or even Guts' Dragon Slayer sword. The way that this adds to the like iconic personality of the character, it's like a purely like visual detail, but it adds so much to the personality of the character just having that be part of their silhouette.
And if you're doing a darker book, like in regard to like ink and what I mean, or black and white book, what I mean, that those silhouettes, like they're playing an important role, like positioning the character, or even them moving throughout the panels of the page. Like, I mean, you just, I don't know, you can play with it a lot more. Like, you know what they look like, the silhouette that they have, and when you go to move them throughout the panel, what I mean, because each panel is basically a camera angle. And when you go to move them throughout the panel, you can play with those, the light across them, like say they're running across, what I mean, or hiding, what I mean. You want to put them in the panel, want to put them in the page, but you want to like imply that they're that they're being stealthy or hiding or whatever. You play with like lighting on just aspects of that silhouette to give it that feel. You let the reader's brain fill in the blanks, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, one of like the the nature of dark fantasy universe is one of the reasons why we like them, is because we know that people are going to die a lot. There's going to be a lot of death in it.
Right.
So having cool like weapon characterization, good design, like also if you have a colorist too, like gets their blood splatter just right. Like you want to make sure that like the death isn't something that gets boring to sort of see over and over again. You want to like each death wants to be refreshing in its own way almost.
Right. David is like, I want to right there, a blood spot. Right there is a blood spot.
Yeah, what's flinging at you? What's shooting at you? Let's get a little twist on that.
Oh gosh.
Really accentuate that. So yeah.
Let me try and remember the name of the thing.
So I will say, drawing, and even just a pinup or whatever with the blood splatter, I've done a couple like that, and I actually looked up blood splatter pattern, blood patterns or whatever, blood splatter patterns, just so I like, and I'm of course no expert and whatnot, but like, so you can tell, like, okay, so it looks like it's sprayed this way, and so if I'm gonna recreate that over here, it should probably spray that way too. So give it that same same like angle and whatnot, just that way it looks like it makes sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that was a weird night of looking up references.
Yeah, I don't remember the name of that comic, but there is. An example for blood splatter, but now I can't seem to find it. I think it's fallen to the back of my library. But okay, yeah, I can't find it. I also named it.
Say it was watching Dexter is what inspired me to look it up, because he's like,
Oh yeah,
watch that and you hear like him being a blood spatter expert and whatnot. It's like, oh, I didn't realize that was a thing. Let me look that up.
yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where they can just add like the way you can handle the visuals of the darker aspects of your universe being kills and death or murders or like crime scenes or something like that. Knowing what to show, what to veil, and like
Right.
will do a lot for the identity of your comic, for the thing that makes it stand out compared to like others in the genre. Because if you can get like a truly like was it a really like impactful scene, right? Like Jason Todd on the floor with the crowbar, right? That moment of veil, and show.
Yep.
You can get those moments of impact that really make your Berserker is also another one when it comes to just having blood in a lot of places, where it can make like the visual identity of your comic just really almost make it speak for itself.
Right.
And then that kind of being like the panels are what grabs the attention, and then hopefully you spent so much time developing those questions of morality and the complex character like understandings that when they get into it, they can't help but put it down because they want to see if the character is going to make the right choice or if they're going to keep on making bad decisions or what have you. Speaking of dark fantasy, Doctor Strange's Damnation complete collection is on Comic Soldier Unlimited.
What?
Yeah, Doctor Strange Damnation. It's one of the Donny Cates books, but it's another fascinating case of Doctor Strange versus the devil in Las Vegas.
Oh my god!
I just saw that. Yeah, like that.
So in your writing, Tim, when like working on a dark fantasy story, I know we're talking about like the merging of like dark fantasy and black comedy. Do you feel that a not so much comedic relief, but more like a moral based character? Um, does your hero or anti-hero, whatever your character, your protagonist, do they need that that balance of like a conscience, even if it's in the form of a character, or would you write it without one?
I think some of the best one. I think the best dark fantasies that I have come across do. I'm not going to say that like you don't necessarily need to have one because there's some cases where that's certainly not the case, but at some point in the storyline there needs to be a complete moral compass, either through like one character or combination of characters. It could be that everyone has 1/4 of a good person, and when they come together, they make a decent person, like in Game of Thrones. Right. Where at the end, we finally get semi-functional people working together.
Mm-hmm.
But like to go back to like comic examples, because they consider it manga comics because it's just comics from a different country. Berserk, the fairy, I believe he calls him Tink. I can't remember if that's the actual name or if that's just the nickname he gives him.
Right.
But the fairy that Guts gets is a very moral character, and while Guts tries to fight him off, and it's like, no, I don't need you. He ends up risking his life to save that character several times, and he doesn't know why until he has his confrontation with Griffith, and they come back to reality where he ends up understanding the fact that whatever evil it was that made Griffin join the God Hand or whatever is the exact opposite is in this fairy that is Guts is now kind of starting to be cool with. You also get kind of examples like this with The Witcher, where Dandelion and then Ciri both kind of offer that counterpart for Geralt, as well as in the Black Company, the whole point becomes the fact that these mercenaries who are working for the evil empire and have committed terrible, unforgivable acts, they now see the end of their servitude with the rise of this thing known as the White Rose, the embodiment of good of this prophesied to return has come back. So now they're trying to for Croker, that's the way that he sees his way out, essentially, the end of the cycle. And so having some sort of morality at play to show what good can look like in that universe needs to come to play at some point. That doesn't necessarily need to be a single character, but it can be a combination of characters, or it can be to go to science. Not quite science fiction, but what's it called? It's a noir storyline where the detective is following someone who's been killed and picks up their journals along the way. And the person who died was actually a good person. So the journals are the representation of the good person in this universe.
Okay.
Yeah. And so that's kind of another example of not having the character really there at all, but still having a fully developed character that you would have written out. As a writer, you have already fully developed this character who is just existing through notes left in the journal back for the detective.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know what book or story that is, but I would totally read that.
Book 1 of The Expanse.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. What if your moral character, your moral compass, has given up, I guess. As in, to me anyway. I hate Fairyland. You have Gert, and her moral compass was like the little fly. You know what I mean? And all she wants to do is, to quote the comic, all she wants to do is fluff everybody. And he was like, to begin with, he was like, oh, we got to do what's right and whatnot. But when you start with the story where it finally starts telling the story of her traveling through Fairyland, he's like, I don't care. I'm done. You broke me.
Yeah, that's I kind of like that. That's. I mean, it's kind of the same thing where it's still there, it's still present, but it's just portrayed in a way that's now different.
Right.
Kind of hack and slash. I keep forgetting their characters' names since it's been forever since I read it, but they're both not good people, but they're both half of a good person, the monster and the girl. So they still have moments where they pull each other in the right direction.
Okay.
Yeah. I think also of what's it called? Lies of P. Jiminy Cricket has died and is now just a soul contained in a light jar. And so he's guiding Pinocchio in this kind of thing, but he's still like, hey, you should kill these people.
Oh my God.
But that's also just kind of another fun take on that is another example of that same vibe is God of War, I think it's Ragnarok, when I can't remember the giant's name, but they take the head that Kratos has strapped to his belt.
Like, I've never played that game.
Mimir. Yeah. Essentially, they end up getting the head of Mimir, the god of wisdom from Norse mythology, and Kratos, and he straps it to his belt. So you just have the head of Mimir, who's like guiding Kratos and Atreus on their story.
Talking head.
Kinda, yeah, pretty much. David does have a few things that he's colored coming out. I don't know if David's written anything, but colored, yes.
Yep. I'm working on Demon right now.
Nice.
I am coloring away. That's what I'm doing. And then I also have the covers. The covers for Achilles Had Landed 2. 2 of the covers I did
Nice.
Nice.
on those.
Okay. That has been about all of my notes, though. Let's say if you're interested in writing fantasy or comedy and want to explore darker themes, I'd absolutely go for it in a comic. With a comic, you don't really have a special effects budget, and you have almost like unlimited space to do get really into the visual identity of some of these darker ideals, but still allowing you to break out your dialogue writing chops. So I find that a lot of really good dark fantasy or black comic stories have been done in comics.
And in regular stories, right? Regular movies and regular novels and whatnot. It's one of the reasons why I like obviously I love westerns. I've made that clear all the time.
Yeah.
But my next almost equal favorite genre after that is crime noir. You know what I mean? Any story that has that, I want to say the OG old James Cagney style story and narration during the thing during the storyline, Dylan Dog does it. You know what I mean? The movie Dylan Dog. I know it's based off an Italian comic, but the movie Dylan Dog is a very modern, supernatural, noir crime story, and so you can play a lot with lighting in that regard for for settings for tone in the world that you're creating for this detective story, and it's fun. It really is if I could get and do a crime story like that would be so much fun. But just the idea of it, I like reading about it. I like reading stories like that. Every now and then I'll stream an old TMC. They'll have the old noir crime stories on there. Those are always fun to watch.
Let's see. I do have some supernatural stuff coming out. I have Silverline presents Bram Stoker's Dracula, which is currently being inked and should be getting colored and pushed out here soon. So be on the lookout for that. Yeah. And this is a Dracula that's much more accurate much more loyal to the original source material. So we're actually getting away with much more graphic and body horror style content.
Because it's sticking closer to the, like you said, to the source material because of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when in the book, when you get the scene where you have the Lord's girlfriend buried with holding her severed head in her arms with her mouth stuffed full of garlic, and that's a visual that needs to be in a page.
Right?
Yeah.
It's funny when I was when Jose was talking about his noir, what popped into my head was the Ninjago Zane when he
Nice.
those episodes where he's he's narrating and they're like, "Are you talking to yourself?"
He's narrating out loud. Just
kind of like the things on Family Guy when Peter's saying stuff that is in his head, but he's actually saying it, and he's
right, say out loud.
Yeah. I just picture this noir story that that Jose is doing, where it's got that type of person. Maybe it's maybe it's serious, maybe it's injecting comedy like that.
Right.
So, but yeah.
But have to have that one guy that does that, right? You have to put that scene. There's like there's a Western book you're doing. There has to be a showdown, right? There has to be high noon showdown. You do a supernatural story, there's got to be bats everywhere. you do a noir story. There's got to be that guy narrating out loud. No inner monologue at all.
Exactly. It's awesome.
Now it's going to have to happen. You know that, right, Dave?
Yeah. You have to talk to Roland to convince him
right.
to do that book.
I'll get the script going. Cool. Okay. Well, do you guys have anything else you wanted to mention on a topic? Any thoughts or questions you had? We didn't cover already.
In regards to art for like a dark fantasy book, don't be afraid of black. I know that's funny because I was that guy that was definitely afraid to put black on anything. Because like, I don't want to cover this. I want the detail here and there. But yeah, don't be afraid of black.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can always pull out of it with like white or doing it digitally. It's easy because you can just do your layer in black and then do another layer with white where you're pulling your whatever image you want, whatever setting, whatever tone you want out of the black with white or gray tones. Doing it by hand, I think it'd be a little more thoughtful of where your blacks and your whites are, but you can still throw white paint on it. I mean, one way or the other.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to use black.
Yeah, and along those themes, with limited stuff that I did inking years ago, but don't be afraid to experiment. You're not doing a superhero comic, so you're not having to have pristine lines and things like that. Don't be afraid to blend into the background, and like I said, a lot of black can do that. Things, also like, splatter, splatter inks and stuff like that would be good, something to play around with and see if that's, how you like it. And, and like Jose said, there's always, you can always reverse to a level with throwing white in there to kind of correct things. But, maybe before you throw on the finished stuff, maybe you have another sheet here that you go, all right, well, let's throw around this and see what.
Well, I know we were taught in school that if you were not sure of the blacks you put on, throw a piece of tracing paper over there. Tracing paper will take the whole black and not soak it through. You just throw it on there and say, oh yeah, see if that's something you want. See if that's the look you want. And if not, well, redo it, rethink it.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't have to commit to it right away, but definitely don't be afraid of it.
And with a lot of people using digital mediums now, there is that undo button.
Right? Command Z is your phone.
Exactly.
It's Silverline going to New York Comic Con. I don't know if you have anyone in the New York area. I've not heard anything.
I haven't heard anybody in particular that's going.
Right. But
unless
the trip if somebody wants to give us a table.
Was Mickey? Do you know if he was saying that he was going? That's more of a personal thing.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I haven't heard of anybody, define. I hear tons of things about Florida shows. That's where a lot of the bulk stuff goes. Around the a little farther south.
Hefe and I have a convention Saturday, so
There you go. Where are you going to be at?
it is. I think it's Galacticon in Winter Garden.
Okay.
It's on Saturday. If you're in the area, come say hi.
Hopefully it's dry there.
Right. Well, my area definitely did not get a lot of rain. We got a lot of hurricane winds, but John Crowther, who lives in DeLand, they had like flash flooding where like sections of asphalt road got washed out.
Yeah.
Like, wow.
Yeah, I saw the photos of the highway, and that was absolutely insane.
Right.
Well, I know Tim kind of touched on a little bit when we first started, but I am very happy that all of our team and a lot of the residents pulled through fine.
Yeah.
And it's a huge, scary thing. I've seen some videos of some of the hard hit areas and all that, and I'm very appreciative that a lot of people came out okay, and and surprising. I know it's hard for the first couple of the first week or two without power and everything, but Jose is back. He's got power and he's got internet, so that's a pretty good testament of turning things around. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
So I think he just froze.
I think so.
I think that was ironic.
Yeah. Well, on that note, this has been our prescribed time for the show on Tuesday. Oh, there he is. He's back. All right.
He's back.
Is that me?
Yeah, that was you.
All of a sudden, I was talking about me being the last one to get powered, and all the little screens went black. And I'm like, no.
So the last second they got you, they pulled it back.
I guess.
Thanks everybody that was talking the stream and participating. That's
yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yes. We are live every Tuesday, 8 p.m. Pacific time. And we want to thank everyone who is watching live, chatting with us. And if you're listening to podcast services around the world afterwards and want to be part of the conversation, head on over to youtube.com or twitch.com/Silverline Comics and join the conversation like Bloodline JP, Paige, Alfred, and Roberto have tonight. We'll be back next week at 8 p.m. Pacific time. Yes, we have heard about the hurricane. We're just talking about how Jose lived through it. But we'll be back next week talking about how to draw Monster Anatomy. So we'll be getting fun. Yeah.
Well, we were supposed to do it this week, but we weren't sure if you'd be on, and we knew that you needed to be here. So
yes,
that's awesome.
So we will be back with that. Make sure to check out Wednesday Lamb and Silver Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern on those respective days, and check out Galacticon. Yes.
Yep.
Check out Galacticon on this Saturday and go shake down Jose for me.
And Roland.
Yes. Specifically Jose, but yes, you can get both of them for me.
Right.
We'll be back next week to talk about drawing Monster Anatomy. So until that time.
There it is.
Make mine
Silverline.
Hey, I'm G-Rod. Make mine Silverline.
Bye, everybody.
You heard me.